Hi, it's Mayor David Stahl. Welcome to another edition of Totally East Brunswick. I'm joined here today with Jim White, who's the Township Business Administrator, and Lou Neely, the Township's Chief Financial Officer. It's budget time here in East Brunswick, and I thought it was important for our residents to understand fully the entire budget process that the Township undergoes. And welcome, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
One of the first things I really want to talk about that I deal with a lot as mayor is what's a misconception about my position as mayor and the township councils with respect to the school board. And one of the issues that's before the council right now is the Board of Education budget, which was defeated at the polls. But one thing I want to stress to the residents is that my office, myself, the township council, we don't draft the Board of Education budget. We have nothing to do with its preparation. We're not responsible for any of their contracts. The township, we do collect their taxes, so I think a lot of people think somehow that we are responsible for their policies. Jim, why don't you explain, now that the Board of Education's budget was defeated, what the role of the township council is?
The role of the township council, by statute, the governing body now becomes the reviewing authority for the budget. They have a very finite period in which to act. No later than May 19th, the Township Council has to give the exact number for the tax rate for the Board of Education. So we have this very compressed period of time in which to review the budget and come up with the final total number. Now, even when we do that, whether we recommend cuts of a certain amount or additions of a certain amount, which we would be permitted to do, the Board of Education does not have to follow the recommendations that the governing body makes. They are still charged with the exact manner in which the budget is carried out. But we do have now, less than 4 weeks to put that together and certify the exact amount of the tax rate for the Board of Education.
That's a good technical concept, but what really happens is the Board of Education budget is made up of 3 parts. There's the part you pay is the local property tax. There's the state aid that they receive, and then they have other miscellaneous revenues which come from a whole bunch of sources. And with that, the Board of Education is supposed to provide a thorough and efficient education. That's what the Constitution says. Now, those are fuzzy words, thorough and efficient, as if we know every individual student and how we're going to do that. And so the council is charged with the obligation of coming up with sufficient money to provide the Board of Education so that they can provide that thorough and efficient education. Now, we have to the council has to determine that tax rate levy, but they just can't arbitrarily say, well, we're going to give you X dollars. We have to play this game that you go through the budget and you delineate, as you said, a whole bunch of recommendations that the mayor and council might like to see implemented, give it to the Board of Education, and they have every right to ignore it, and most often they do, because they set their own priorities and they set their own goals. And so the tax levy is what we're really talking about. We'll establish the tax levy, the governing body will, by that determination, and that has to be by May 19th, isn't it, Jim?
Yes.
All right, well, I know the council president, the vice president, myself will be meeting with the Board of Education soon, so it's one way we get some input, and I know that there will be residents that will reach out to members of council. It is a difficult process, but one that needs to be completed. If we could turn our attention now to our municipal budget, as that was just introduced at the council meeting recently, where we have continued, certainly since I've been mayor, on our restructuring plan from our municipal government, where we've reduced expenses from roughly over $63 or $64 million to, I think this year's budget's about $56.5 million. And one of the other things that we have been continuing to do is not look at a 1 year in a vacuum, and to look like, as we prepared the 2010 budget, we have some eye on what's going to occur in 2011 and 2012. Lou, why don't you provide some oversight as to some specific numbers that have been changed over the course of the last 2 years, just to give some explanation to our residents. And then, Jim, I'll turn to you. If you could kind of explain the process, because again, even though the council just received this, we've been working on this for the better part of almost 6 to 9 months on this.
Sure, Mayor, I'm glad to do that. First of all, the budget is not a fixed document. It's a dynamic document that deals with when there's a snowstorm, there's a rainstorm, there's floods in the summertime, there's extra heat, there's drought. So there's a whole bunch of issues that have to be dealt with in a dynamic way. So when we structure a budget to begin with, that doesn't mean that it's going to actually work out that way, because time has a tendency to change. So one of the things that you've done as mayor, and we've talked about, is to plan. When in 2008, dating myself here, in 2008, the municipal...
Well, then you could have said the 1800s.
In 2008, the municipal budget was $63,800,000. And today, the municipal budget is introduced as $56,600,000. And that's a 11% reduction in 2 years. Now, the cynic will say, see, I knew all along there was fat and there was just lazy municipal government employees. Well, cynic, hold on, because that's not the case. We've reduced the budget, and we've reduced it because we've reduced debt service by 40% over that period of time. That doesn't mean that you've not taken care of the roads and we've not taken care of the key issues, but we have restructured the debt so that taxpayers aren't paying so heavily for debt. So debt service has been reduced 40%. I've got a couple other numbers here. Severance benefits, we've had 21 retirements this year, and when people retire, they have an accumulation of some sick or vacation time, and we owe them their closing payment as they leave the door. Well, severance payments are down by 13% over that time. Salaries and wages, the absolute amount of money that we're paying for the full municipal workforce is down by 7.8%. So we've reduced the number of people receiving a paycheck, and even though there's been increased salaries granted to the police and fire because of their contract, total payment of wages and salaries are down 7.8%. Other expenses, as Nancy Pinkins the other night referred to as pencils and paper, in 2 years that's down by 5%. Yes, costs are up. And what are some of the costs? Well, pension costs, as we know, have increased, and they've increased by about 11%.
The one thing I want to point on that, though, is last year the council approved the full payment. We did not take as a township the deferral in the pension plan that was offered by Governor Corzine at that time. So we made our full payments, which will help lessen the burden in years to come on the pension.
Oh, and what a smart move that was, because those towns that, quote, took advantage of deferral simply allowed themselves to get caught into compound interest, and they're going to be paying a lot higher price. So by making full payment last year, you made the right choice. Insurance costs. Everyone knows that medical insurance, and people out there are struggling with medical insurance and dental and prescription insurance. Well, our insurance costs in the last 3 years have only increased 0.6%. Less than 1%. So we've held the insurance costs flat for 3 years because of some management tools we've done, and we still provide good coverage. Now, we're sitting here in the library being taped, and they're showing this show, and the library has been very cooperative. Their budget has been reduced by 9.7%, so their total reliance upon property tax dollars is down by almost 10%. That just gives you an idea of the dynamics. We have lowered the cost of government. We've lowered the cost of debt service. We've lowered the cost of salaries and wages, and yet providing the service that is expected from East Brunswick.
Well, Jim, I know that as Lou indicated, like our salary line's down. We had in excess of 20 employees leave through natural attrition, just through retirements. To the best of my recollection, I don't even believe that we've hired anyone back to fill those positions. It's pretty much been everyone else has assumed other responsibilities.
Correct. With all of the reorganizations and all of the retirements, we have not replaced any of those positions. We're having exit interviews this week with several employees who've just decided within the past month to retire, and the remaining employees are going to be picking up their duties, at least for the foreseeable future. You look at the number of staff that we had even 10 years ago, and we're down more than 10% from what we've started with. We've been doing this for several years, and in the past 2 years now, we've really made some deep structural changes that are going to benefit the township financially for years to come. The police department has been totally restructured, a tremendous savings, and we've never sacrificed the police officer on the street doing the patrolling and responding to calls. We've consolidated and eliminated some of the other programs that we were doing in the police department that, quite frankly, we could afford to do when times were very good, but we had to re-examine exactly what our purpose was and reassign those duties. So all across the board, every department has been reorganized. People are doing more work, and that's the way we've been able to reduce our costs.
Well, and efficiency, the term he used, and I don't know if the general public out there knows it, but Jim talked about doing exit interviews. When someone has worked in a job for 20 or 25 years, who knows that job better than that person? And when they're ready to leave and they're ready to depart, and you say, tell me, your job, you've been so important, you've done this for us, how can we do this job better, or where are there efficiencies that can be made? And people want to share good news, and they want to share where good things can happen. And so by doing that, Jim's been able to learn just where we can make changes, structural changes, responsibility changes, and the people who are leaving are really a valuable resource to tell us how we can make those changes.
Our employees, for the most part, even while they're doing their jobs, are constantly making or providing information on how they can do it better. I mean, we get a lot of the program changes we've made have been a lot of them have been the suggestions of the employees and how they make it work. For instance, on the leaf collection program we did last fall, where we went out to like Joe Patrick and Tom Williams and tried to talk about how we could do it more efficiently, again, using, making sure our residents had quality of service. We kind of just tweaked with the number of pickups we did with respect to the bagging program. No one even really noticed it, but we saved, like over $100,000 when I got that report back from Tom. So a lot of that work is a two-way street with our employees, helping provide some of that information and then giving the feedback along. Certainly their exit interviews provide additional ones, but we're constantly getting new ideas from employees as time goes on, which provides cost savings. One of the other things that we've kind of done differently over the past couple of years is how we've done our capital spending. Again, maybe, Jim, if you want to talk about what the difference is between capital and operating budgets.
The term capital budget that we refer to deals mainly with larger purchases and long-term projects. There are certain laws that give us guidance and tell us what we can do and what we can't do, and what you can borrow money for in New Jersey and what you can't borrow money for. We're not permitted to borrow money for everyday expenditures. And that's one of the big differences. Very often we hear residents say, well, can't you run your town more like I run my house? Sometimes that's just not possible because the law doesn't allow me to do it. You can have some type of catastrophic event and you can go out and borrow money real quickly. I very often can't do that. Look at what happened just within the past few months. We had the worst winter as far as expenditures in the past 13 years. And coming right after that, we had some storms that, again, cost us as much money as some of the snowstorms. Now, there's no way that you can foresee those types of weather events and budget for that. So you have to have some type of leeway in your budget. And in East Brunswick's case, for snow, we were fortunate enough, and many, many years ago, long before Mayor you and I were involved in the town, Mr. Neely set up a snow reserve account when it was permitted by the state, so that we were able to still provide the service even though we got hit with storm after storm after storm. Those are the types of planning devices that a good municipality will utilize so that you don't have the effect of raising taxes and then coming back down, then raising taxes, coming back down, and keeping it more on an even keel for those types of things. But the capital budget is where we will do our major road programs and purchase major equipment, dump trucks, and those types of equipment that have a useful life in excess of 5 years. And the whole theory being that the residents who are going to enjoy the services, who are going to benefit from those purchases, are the ones who are going to be paying for it over a longer period of time. You and I, at least for the most part, do not go out and purchase a home with cash. We pay for it over time, and because we're going to be enjoying the use of that house over time. It's the same theory when you go out and bond and borrow money. And as Mr. Neely will tell us, now is the time to make these types of purchases, because with the township's great financial rating, we're able to borrow money, far cheaper than the average resident can do it.
Oh, how cheap?
Well, we just sold $50 million of bond anticipation notes, and borrowed the money for 1 full year. Most of that is to continue to fund the parking garage, but we borrowed it at 1/2%. So if you can borrow $50 million at 1/2%, that is very exceptional. And so that low interest rate permits us to apply more principal retirement.
You mentioned the parking garage. We have both the Nielsen facility as well as the Transportation and Commerce Center. The bonding that's in existence for both structures have been met. You've planned out the pro forma on how we're paying off those bonds. Some questions I get from a few people that, quite frankly, I don't think fully understand. Certainly, we are having some difficulties right now with our Golden Triangle development. That we're in litigation with the redeveloper. But that's had no impact on your financial structure with respect to the garages, correct?
That's correct. The parking utility is the utilitarian concept. Those who utilize it pay for it. So it does not impact the general public. Only commuters who park and ride the buses pay for the parking utility. So they're paying for the structure, the upkeep, the debt service, the operations, the electric, the lights on, the personnel that are there, and that's all coming out of the commuter ticket, so that the commuters are paying their share, and it has no impact on the general property tax or the other people who do not commute. The same with the water utility. We have some people who have water wells. Those people that have a water well pay nothing towards the water utility. The utility is self-liquidating. Those who utilize it pay for it, and it does not impact the tax rate. It's the utilitarian concept. Those who utilize it pay for it.
Jim, if we go back to the operating budget, as I said, it was just introduced to council recently. They'll have probably about a couple months before it's adopted, because obviously we need for the state to act.
Correct.
But there was months and months of preparation in advance of us presenting it to the council. Why don't you just describe what that general process is?
The budget that the council is just now seeing within the past couple of weeks, and here it is mid-April, was really started back at the department head level back in October. We send out all of the budget forms back in October, and the department heads start putting down their proposed budgets. They fill in all of their programs, they put in all of their personnel, and they put in the justifications for not only all of their personnel, but every one of their line items. And we break it down into what I think is incredible detail, so that the public, if they came into my office and looked at my budget book, they would really be able to see what their tax dollars are being utilized for, whether it's books and subscriptions, whether it is membership to some type of organization, whether it is for a professional who's doing some work, legal, engineering. We break down every department into dozens of subcategories, and it really goes into tremendous detail. So once the department heads finish that up, they submit it to my office, and I go through all of the review. After that is done, and it's given to the finance office, we start actually inputting all of the data, and we do several budget runs. And when I say several budget runs, Mayor, I think you've experienced that this year, where we will see you on Monday and hand you this 90-page document and say, okay, here's the number where we're at. But as I've joked with you in the past, I've said, don't spend too much time looking at it, because there'll be another budget run on Tuesday and another budget run on Thursday. And as Lou alluded to, it is a fairly fluid type of document. You're getting information from the state telling you, take this out, put this in. We're getting grants all the time, and East Brunswick gets tremendous amount of grants, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and then they have to be added to the budget. So it's constantly changing, and that's what makes it an interesting process and a difficult process at the same time, because the department heads start in October. Here it is in April. It's not approved yet. It's not going to be adopted until late June. And the department heads always joke with me that it seems like they're just getting used to the budget and spending some of the money that we allow them, and it's time to start working on the next year's budget again.
They just finished the Super Bowl and they're back to training immediately. But that's an interesting point you raised, though, with respect to the budget, in that our overall budget this year is like $56.6 million, but the amount raised through taxation is roughly about $32 million in terms of that line, or it's actually 34.5.
$34 million.
Right. So when Jim mentioned the amount of money we get from grants and other revenue sources, it's actually
$23 million.
Right. So that goes a long ways to making our budget work without having to tax our residents so much. We recently asked council to dissolve the sewage authority, and my goal in that is, first of all, to make perfectly understood, that has absolutely no impact on our municipal budget. It's good if it comes back within the township. It's its own utility. It doesn't help our operating budget. Doesn't help our capital budget. There's no reserves that's going to flow in. So this is strictly being done just to manage that department or that utility in a different manner.
Well, it's good government, is what you're saying. When the Sewage Authority was created, it was created in the late 50s after the Korean War, and East Brunswick had a busting out of homes and development. The school system were building schools right and left to accommodate all the new children. And in doing so, they had used up the school's bonding capacity, and they used up the township's bonding capacity, so that the township was not able to issue any long-term debt to install new sewer lines. To install the sewer lines, they created this autonomous division called the East Brunswick Sewage Authority, and they were able to sell revenue bonds, and the revenue that comes from the sewage fees for the connection paid for the infrastructure. Well, that's 50 years ago. The infrastructure has been built. The township is built. And do you need, or the question you ask is, do we need an autonomous authority that has all of the superstructure that goes along with the operating division, or can that superstructure be absorbed by the township and still keep the operation effective and efficient, and in doing so, maintain the low cost and protect that cost for more years so that the homeowners will not have to pay higher prices for sewage disposal. And as we looked at that, based upon your direction, we came out and said, yes, we can save a significant amount of money. We can guarantee that the rates won't increase for a couple of years because they were scheduled to be increased. And by having this economy and this efficiency, you're going to be able to hold the rates and still provide the same high-quality service that the authority provided. Now, it's important for everyone to understand that the authority operated well. We're not criticizing the individuals. It simply is a structural change in taking the superstructure of two organizations and just having one superstructure so that you have the efficiencies.
I don't view it any differently. I mean, obviously, it's not the same as public safety, but Jim alluded to or mentioned before how the public safety department was, their assets or their employees were redeployed. You know, it's just something that I think, as mayor, have pledged to do is we're just going to re-examine everything that we're doing and finding different ways to do it because I think the times demand it. Jim, you indicated before that our municipal budget is very detailed. And I know last year we had it up on the website for the first time, and I know it was just, again, recently introduced, but I think we will get that back up on the website.
Yes.
So we'll be as transparent as possible.
Yes, it'll be there, and if anybody wants to review it there, if they want to come to my office, take a look at it, and I'd be glad to sit down with the average resident and go over it. I've been saying my whole career that municipal government at the local level, gives you the most for your tax dollar of any branch of government. When you look at the amount of money that you're paying for a municipal portion of your taxes, and that's something that we keep trying to kind of drum into people, that we understand their total tax bill is significant, but the 18 or 19% of that that comes to the township, with that, and you're getting the police services and public works services and recreation, the best library in the state of New Jersey, and all of the other tremendous services that East Brunswick provides. I've always been adamant that this is the absolute best bargain for your tax dollar of the local services that are provided.
Lou, I know we're kind of jumping all over the place, but when we went through this year's municipal budget, and Jim indicated that, quite frankly, you were coming up with new drafts on the hour, and a lot of the problem had to do with some of the calculations that the State Division of Community Affairs, the Department of Community Affairs, DCAs, would require you to do. I kind of put it in the view of whether it's one of the sports groups with their cap, where teams can't spend beyond the cap. We lost over $1 million in state aid from this year over year, if we compare it to last year.
Correct.
What other implications or requirements did the state make you do with respect to this year's budget?
Well, first of all, there is this thing called a 4% levy, so that the tax levy that we're talking about cannot increase more than 4% in any given year. And inclusive in that 4% levy is a thing called the Reserve for Uncollected Taxes. When the tax office in the town collects all of the property taxes, it collects the money for the Board of Education, collects the money for the fire districts, collects the taxes for the county, and it collects the local taxes. And so when you look at that, that's $200 million it's collected. Now, not everybody is able to pay their taxes on time, and there's a delinquency. We have 1.5%. We collect 98.5% of the taxes. So the 1.5% that does not pay is required us to have a reserve so that the Board of Education, the county, and the fire districts will receive 100%. Well, that reserve calculation is a mandatory calculation, and it threw us over. We had to put an additional $300,000 in this reserve line this year because the Board of Education's number is large, the county's number is large, and collectively, when you add up the 3 fire districts, it adds to it. And then you add our $34 million in, and that number forced us to try to stay below the 4% cap, and yet have a zero tax increase. Well, we weren't able to do it. You've got a 3-cent tax increase, which is $30 a year, and we had to increase the reserve by over $300,000, which basically means that ate up all of the tax increase.
Yeah. Gentlemen, we're out of time. I do appreciate the information. One thing that I would encourage all the residents that if you want more information with respect to the township's budget, you can call the mayor's office at 732-390-6810. As I said before, we will get a copy of the budget up on the website, and you're more than welcome again to come to the mayor's office, and we'll be more than willing to answer any questions because your involvement in this budget is incredibly important. You're welcome to call, as I said, myself. You certainly can reach out to all the members of the town council who will be adopting the budget in the council meeting in sometime in June. Again, thanks for watching, and gentlemen, much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.